Behind the Attic Wall by Sylvia Cassedy, Chapter 18. For a long while she held very still, blinking into the strange light, staring at the scene before her, trying to make sense out of it all. What was it, anyway? Some kid's playroom, or what? She was surrounded by pieces of furniture, but it was all knee-high. A table set with small flowered dishes, 2 armchairs, a sofa, an iron stove, a cabinet, a couple of beds, a chest. 2 old dolls were propped up on the table. Whose were they? Everything had the air of being suddenly abandoned. Somebody, just moments before, had been playing here, had arranged the dolls at the table, had given them voices, had called Maggie's name, had broken a cup, had called out, "At last," when Maggie flung aside the curtain, and then had gone. Maggie looked around for some exit, some hiding place, but there were no doors, and the window was high above the ground. Through the raging snowflakes she could see, far, far below, 3 stories maybe, the front steps of the house, with the stone urns, tiny now and mounted high with snow, like ice cream cones. There was an alcove in one wall, but it was only as high as her hip, and it held a wash-tub, with a washboard, a broom, a mop, and a dustpan, nothing more. She examined the front of the wardrobe that served as one wall of the little room. Maybe someone was inside. She pressed her ear against its front door, listening, but she heard nothing, and finally she turned the latch. The interior was dark and empty, and smelled of old wood. She turned again to the dolls, with their china faces webbed with cracks. One was dressed in a woman's clothes, one in a man's. And Maggie looked from one to the other, taking in their finely traced eyebrows, their brightly outlined lips, their closed ears. The woman doll wore a dark print dress, long and full, with a frill of lace flaring like a flower vase at each wrist. A white cotton cap was pinned to a patch of red matting that covered her china scalp, and a string of beads hung at her neck. One china hand lay stiffly on the lid of the china teapot. The other rested on a little shawl that served as a tablecloth. On her feet were leather boots with rows of tiny buttons, and on the floor, beneath her, lay a scattering of china fragments. The man doll had short red hair, painted side whiskers, a heavy suit of clothes, and a ruffled collar at his chin. An oblong of yellow newsprint was propped between his outstretched hands. He, too, wore black-buttoned boots, and at his feet was in a straw basket a china dog lay curled on a pillow of faded red velvet. Who owned them? Who had dressed them, spoken for them, seated them in their chairs? Who? Maggie stepped back into the darkness on the other side of the wardrobe and peered at the large gowned shapes. Someone, maybe, was inside one of them, waiting. Slowly, silencing her shoes against the floor, she walked toward them. She could snatch off their white coverings, one after another, and suddenly there was a rustling from the doll room, and a voice, the familiar voice of the walls and the trees, spoke aloud. "Now we may begin." And Maggie rushed back in. "She's here, at last," the voice came. Could it be from the woman doll? From inside her head or something, because her lips didn't move, but she was speaking, saying real words. A doll! At the same moment her china hand, suddenly alive, began to grasp the handle of the teapot and to lift it from the table. Maggie shrank back. What was going on? "Timothy, John," the doll said, or seemed to say, "put down the paper. It's Maggie. She's here." And then the man doll also, with some deep interior grindings and creakings, began to move, stirring in his chair and slowly lowering the scrap of newsprint to his knee. Maggie's hands grew cold. "Ah, there you are, Maggie," he said in a voice that she had come to know over the months as the man's. "I was afraid you had lost your way. It must be nearly tea-time, isn't it?" And he turned slowly to face the other doll. "It's past," the woman doll answered. "It can't be past," he answered, "if it hasn't begun." And by bending forward at the waist and straightening first one leg then the other, he rose from his chair. Maggie edged back to the wardrobe. "The trouble is," the woman doll said, leaning over the table, "we can't have tea at all. There is no cup at this place." And she tapped her hand on the edge of the table. "A teacup is a very important thing at tea time. It keeps tea from being poured into the saucer." "You do have a cup," the man doll corrected her. "It is lying next to your shoe." The woman doll bent down to inspect the hill of china fragments at her feet. "That is true," she agreed, "although it seems a bit rearranged." "That is because you broke it," the man doll told her. "I didn't break it," she answered. "I only dropped it. It broke itself when it hit the floor." "Maybe we should drop the others," the man doll suggested, "so that they will all match." "But they might not break in the same way," the woman doll said, "and then none of them would match. I think Maggie should sweep this one up and choose another from the shelf. Maggie?" She slowly turned her body in Maggie's direction. "Would you mind getting the broom?" Maggie felt as though she had been suddenly picked out of an audience or addressed by a puppet on a stage. Her face flamed, and she pressed her back against the wardrobe. "The broom is right there," the man doll said, also addressing her, and he stretched his arm toward the little alcove, where a rush broom stood against the wall. Above it a red dustpan with a painted flower on its tray hung from a hook. "I wonder," he said to his doll companion, "how did people sweep up teacups before there were brooms?" "There were no teacups before there were brooms," she replied. "The teacup was invented because of the broom, to give the broom something to do." Maggie kept her eyes fixed firmly on the two dolls. If need be, she could turn around in a second and fly back to her room, but for now she waited and watched. The man doll had resumed his seat and was holding out the strip of newsprint in front of his face. The woman doll's hand was poised once again on the teacup. Neither doll moved, and Maggie wondered if maybe, as in a puppet show, the performance had come to an end. Would a curtain come down? Should she clap? Maybe they needed winding, and she put her hand out an inch, 2 inches. "Come, Maggie," the man doll said, suddenly lowering his bit of newspaper. "Miss Christabel is waiting." Miss Christabel? That was the other doll's name? Maggie looked again at its webbed china face. Miss Christabel, an apt name, fragile like a crystal bell. "Come," the woman doll said, "before the water boils away." What water? What was this, anyway? "Who are you?" she wanted to ask. "What are you?" But the words only lay in her throat, and again she watched as though the two dolls were puppets in a theater. Suddenly she heard a new noise, a soft grumbling like a gentle snore issuing from the floor. The man doll lowered his arm. "Juniper is hungry for his tea," he said, and slowly, bending from the waist, he reached down to the basket at his feet and raised the china dog to his lap. Maggie had seen china animals like that on her knick-knack shelves, molded hollow figures with shiny glaze, painted whiskers, and a hole underneath where your finger would fit. The dog on the doll's lap had a black patch across its head and another at the end of its tail. There was a touch of pink inside each ear and a blue dot for each eye. Its front paws held a red ball chipped like a polished fingernail. "Juniper," the man doll said, stroking the dog's back with the edge of his china hand. "Soon we'll have our tea, and then we'll all go out to the garden." The garden! Did these dolls visit her garden? Did they somehow manage to slip downstairs without being noticed and go outside? Had they all along been spying on her from some hidden corner as she sat seemingly alone under the birches? If she had looked in just the right place, could she have caught sight of a china hand among the rose bushes or a tiny black boot under a shrub? "Maggie will want to see the roses," the man doll said, continuing to address the dog. "They are looking especially bright today." The snow was still hurtling past the little window, and there were no roses. The bushes outside had been bare for several weeks, and wrapped in burlap shawls. Or was there some other garden where roses still bloomed? "But we can't go to the garden," the woman doll said, "until we have tea, and we can't have tea until there's a new cup, and we can't have a new cup until the old one is swept away, because I get splinters in my shoe every time I move." The tea table was set for 3. The third place would be for the little dog, Maggie decided. Or was there a third doll? She swept her eyes around the little room in search of another china head, a baby head maybe, but there was nothing besides the doll furniture, and she began inspecting it piece by piece. 2 canopied beds, a china cabinet with rows of doll dishes stacked in little pyramids, soft with dents in the pillows where 2 small heads had rested, a closed chest with carved handles at either end, a stove like the ones in old-fashioned calendar scenes, black and square, with a high shelf holding a row of canisters and a bread box. All in all, it was a room that was just right for the 2 china dolls. Or 3. A nice room. The Backwoods girls would love it. "Choose a cup of tea to match the saucer, Maggie," the man doll said. "We can't have you taking your tea out of an old set." The third setting was for her? Was she was supposed to join them at the table? The dolls were leaning forward now, turning their faces toward her. They were just a couple of old dolls, she told herself. Dumb old dolls, and yet crazily they were waiting for her to move, to speak, to sweep up a little hill of fragments from the floor and take tea with them. She turned her eyes away. Outside the snowflakes were thinning out. A distant crow sailed past, and she listened to its caw, wishing somehow that it would fly to the window and interrupt, with some urgent message, this strange moment when two dolls waited for her to follow their command. But the crow flew out of view, and the windows showed nothing but a square of floating flakes, limp as lettuce shreds. "Well, Maggie?" the man doll said. They were expecting her to answer them, to obey them, even. A couple of dolls, less than 2 feet tall, and a knick-knack dog she could hold aloft like a thimble on the tip of her finger. Just a short while ago she had expected to find two nice strangers and a dog welcoming her excitedly to their special place behind the schoolroom door. Before that, over the weeks when she listened to the voices, she had created visions of a wonderful room with a stove and a kettle and tea things and a real dog scratching at the floor, and all along the voices had only belonged to a couple of old dolls and a china animal in a jumble of toy furniture. There wasn't even a door. "Maggie," the man doll said, "Miss Christabel's shoe keeps getting bits of teacup in its sole." His smile remained sweet and patient as he turned toward her. Okay, then, she would answer them, and she took a long breath. She should have cleared her throat, too, because when she did speak, her voice came out cracked. "I don't play with dolls," she got out. And that is the end of Chapter 18.